Support for makers comes from Clive Daniel Home and by Chico's.
I tend to hear often, we can't find qualified, Latinos or Latinas to fill this board position or to fill this job position. And my question is always, where are you looking, of course? But I see the Institute as playing a role in that development, especially for women, where they can see themselves as leaders. Some of us may say, well, we're just housewives, what kind of skills do I have? And I always, take pleasure in saying, well, you run your household, don't you? You do the groceries, you pay the bills, and those are transferable skills. I grew up with a very strong Puerto Rican tradition. In my home, it was a rule that we had to speak Spanish. We were never in bilingual education. My parents nor my grandparents knew English. And so the work that they could find was primarily at that time in the tobacco industry in Connecticut. For my father, it was really an interesting dynamic because I think for him as a Latino male, there was never any question that I would go to college. And the expectation wasn't that I just went to college. It was that I graduated and that I didn't go there to find a husband. I think people saw sort of my mother as a primary resource in the neighborhood. It made a difference and it sort of guided me in the work that I do and that I've done because I also worked in the inner city and I worked in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And I volunteered and I worked in a city where there were issues just like others, issues with drugs, with gangs, with, I worked in the HIV/AIDS field. I came on 2008 to bring to life that concept. And so this year will be the Hispanic Institute's 5th year where we've put together programming not just for the Hispanic community but the community at large. This community was decimated when that whole real estate bubble burst. So to me it was very important to connect people with experts because so many were being taken advantage of. A lot of Hispanic women, especially now during these economic times, have sort of been put into a situation where they are pursuing those goals that they had in the back of their minds for a while because either they're no longer married or they are and the economic structure has changed within the home. But when they're home, the expectation still is that they're the primary caregivers for their children, that they're to take care of the home. Sometimes I feel like that's a myth, that there really is that balance that you can strike. Some days I feel like I'm doing a really good job, feeling like I'm engaged with my boys, that I'm a good mom, I'm a good wife, and I'm also, a good worker. And then there are days where I just feel like something's got to give here. So I'm not immune to that feeling. And the guilt, that's the hardest thing, the guilt. That was awful. To leave him at a daycare center and to hear him cry was awful. But that's what needed to be done at that time. So like the women I work with, like the women I teach, I also feel divided. I've changed the terms that I use to describe me, whereas before I would say I would be aggressive, now I'm assertive. And the reason why is because I think people respond differently to aggressiveness versus assertiveness. But I still feel like some males would have difficulty with that, with an assertive woman. I didn't feel my ethnicity had such a strong impact in the work that I did when I worked in the Northeast. When I moved to Southwest Florida in 1998, it was almost like that's all it was. I'm invisible to folks. And so I would encourage women to, if you're experiencing that, to really push through it, because for some of us, it could be a deal breaker. I think my proudest achievement so far has been to be able to sort of highlight the work of others, to be able to also provide students an opportunity to see themselves in a different way, to know that they're capable of much more, and to bring those partnerships between faculty and students much closer together. I would like folks to think of me as someone, as a resource, someone they can come to.
Support for Makers comes from Bank of America and by Cypress Cove,